Hi, I'm Chris Steer. I'm running for Lieutenant Governor with Meda DeWitt.
Yeah, thank you. And hello, I'm Meda DeWitt, running for the governor's race in 2026.
My dad was a programmer. I was five, a programmer in Silicon Valley. I was five when the internet really became public, and so I was there right from the start. And things have just transformed dramatically. I'm like, how did we used to do things? Like we had like magazines and catalogs and
How
stuff
do we
like
find
that.
each other?
We used to have a Rolodex of like phone numbers in our heads. So there are a lot of things that are shifting, and the big shift that's happening right now is with AI, and the big environmental impact is with data centers.
So that's a intense subject, and we're seeing across the nation that people are standing up and fighting back against these massive data centers. Some of these are like 150-acre freaking campuses. They're loud, they suck up water, they suck up energy, they are driving the animals and people crazy with the noise. They're also putting out so much heat that they're creating their own weather systems and changing the weather around them.
And that's just the first part of it, because then you start looking at what these data centers are being used for. And it's like using AI to replace the human workforce and as a basis for the panopticon with Flock spying on our every movement in public spaces or private spaces. It's fully justified that there is a massive negative reaction to these things. But where people want to jump a little overboard, I think, is this like, no data centers whatsoever. And it's like, well, if you want to go back to a day before the internet, I guess we can do that. But all our social media, all our emails, all of our workflow, those are hosted in data centers. And what Alaska doesn't have is enough of those data centers to house our own data. We are dependent on data centers from other states. We have no sovereignty over that data. We have no insurance of that data. Like if we get cut off, all of our the whole electronic aspect of our lives goes offline.
We just
And
saw that with
yeah,
Sitka a few years ago, right?
right.
They undersea line was cut and they were in the Stone Ages. They couldn't use cell phones, credit cards, didn't have access to any of their cloud information. You don't own anything. That's one thing that you bring up all the time is you lease these videos,
Right.
you lease your music, you lease this software. You don't own any of it. So if it gets cut off, then you lose your intellectual property, you lose your means of paying and taking care of the accounts of home, you lose your means of communication.
Not just security in the sense of like having our data in our state, but also sovereignty, where it's our laws that regulate our data and our privacy and our rights. And so, what are we going to do?
The way that we're leading through here is we're basing things on the Constitution. Our Constitution says that we are guaranteed freedom and privacy. You have a profile that's already built on you. You have already been psychologically profiled, and they farm you for your data, and then they sell it and make money off of you. We can either go to an extreme and do nothing or go to an extreme and try to shut it all the way down. Either one of those are not going to be successful. It'll go around us in some way. So the only path forward to guarantee that we still have freedom, privacy, and sovereignty is to make it go through us. And so right off the bat, we are going to have a commissioner of technology and data science. We have to. And we have to then have applicable laws and policies and governance. And so that law, policy, and governance, that's where we're going to see the protections. So when we're talking about data centers, we're not talking about bringing in 15-acre megastructures or 150-acre megastructures. We are talking about right-sized systems that are also enclosed and pairing it with renewable energy. And then in our traditional way of being, nothing is waste. So the heat then gets siphoned off to heat the schools or homes. We could have a trilateral agreement between, the tribe, the state, and the city that co-owns that and manages it. So making sure that people own their data, they own their intellectual property, and that we have it on the law and policy that people have the copyright, trademark, and ownership of their likeness, their voice, their personal identifiers. Um, and that they are then held as sovereign peoples. Everything is dependent on the lower 48. So if we actually have our data here, have our structures here, producing food here, increase manufacturing here, and then we are self-sufficient for reals. And Alaskans like to believe that we, can do and we don't need anybody. We're independent, self-sufficient. Right now, that's not true. But with our policies, we're going to make it true. So the renewable energy will be there for the community as well as the data center. The heat can then be piped in and heat greenhouses or the school, so that there's year-round greenhouses.
What is functionally different between, the data centers we'd like to see and these data centers that are being built elsewhere? For starters, scale is a huge thing because when the difference between a 15-acre data center and a data center the size of a shipping container, those small data centers, they're much easier to acoustically insulate, so they're not making a ton of noise. They aren't generating so much heat that they're creating their own weather systems. But they are generating enough heat where, as you were talking about, we can recover that heat. We're actually making use of that heat and increasing energy efficiency. So it makes a complete system. It provides us our data sovereignty. We'll have a nodal network across the state, so they're less subject to catastrophe. If any particular one goes offline, we have that redundancy and resilience built in to our information sovereignty.
This isn't just pie in the sky. I've actually, as president of Yakutat Kwan, we've been looking at how do we build the village of the future, on our own terms? How do we transition from this industrial age to the technological age on our own terms? And this is part of that. And I've been working with indigenous technologist groups from around the world and looking at how do we do this in a way that is in alignment with our traditional ecological knowledge, our values, and not harmful, that it's additive. So there's systems that are developed that are enclosed systems, so they're not sucking up all the water. And then we can also pair it with a water cleaning system. There's this beautiful elder I've been working with in Canada who has a water purification system based on his traditional ecological knowledge and traditional ceremonial knowledge. And that would clean anything that would come out of there to a 9 log, highest grade possible. And the software that supports the sovereignty and renewable energy, it's going to also need that kind of computing to help run it and distribute it. Um, so I'm excited for the future. We could be afraid, but we don't need to be. We need to work together, stand our ground, and make sure that we are defending our rights, defending our freedom, defending our sovereignty, defending our communities, and taking things on our own terms.
Building them on our terms and with our values.
If you have any more questions, put them in the chat. I know that there's some people who are frustrated because I'm pro data center, but not all data centers are the same thing. Like they're very different things. And we want people to educate themselves. We want you to be at the table to help make these decisions. And we want to work in the best interest of our state.